Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everybody. I'm excited about today's show because we're doing our June Star of the Month, and it's an actress that I am very fond of. I've been a fan since I first saw her in her early movies, and then I love to watch her in the 70s and 80s because she became a really wonderful character actress. And we're talking about Ruth Roman, the beautiful raven-haired Ruth Roman. She may not be a household name today, but back in the day, she was a bona fide star. She delivered really grounded, authentic, and watchable performances. Oftentimes, she was mistaken for Ruth Hussey, which I never could understand because they were so different. But Ruth Roman, she possessed her own unique combination of demure, ladylike qualities and then this lusty earthiness that kind of allowed her to very convincingly play everything from society debutantes to gun malls.
I think we both have such a fondness for actors and actresses that can do that can be that sort of, as you described, society debutante, and then can turn around and go, hey, hold your hand, put your hands up.
I know, it was just...
That's my impersonation of a gun mole. How'd I do?
It really showed how versatile she was, and actresses like that.
Yeah.
And I think this is displayed really perfectly if you think about maybe two of the most famous films she's in.
Yes.
When you look at Ruth Roman in The Window from 1949, she, along with Paul Stewart, who plays her husband, they play these murderous villains to the hilt. And then you look at Strangers on a Train from 1951.
So just 2 years later.
2 years later, she plays this high-class, elegant, graceful fiancée of Farley Granger's character.
Right.
So it really shows her versatility.
Yes.
Not many actresses could pull that off, and she does it beautifully.
And not only that, Steve, but in reading about her, she has had a life.
She has had a life.
A life. She is strong and courageous in her own right.
Yes.
She endured a childhood of poverty.
Yes.
She had 4 husbands. She had to deal with the wrath of Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes, which we'll get into that a little bit. It's interesting.
And Hollywood, as we know, its fickle personality and the way that it can treat women in particular. And then she was able to move into character actor and then have a glorious career on television. So I loves me an actress that keeps pushing and fighting, and Ruth Roman is that.
Ruth Roman is a survivor.
Yep.
When I think about Ruth Roman, that's the word I think of. She was a survivor to the highest degree.
Right, right.
Not only did she survive the things you're talking about, but she and her 3-year-old son, Richard, also survived the sinking of the luxury liner Andrea Doria.
It's crazy.
When it collided with another ship, the Stockholm, and it slowly sank off the coast of Nantucket, July 26, 1956. Her survival of that incident was very well documented. All the news reels were out there, so there's a lot of great, interesting information you can find out about Ruth surviving that sinking.
I think her life is ripe for a biopic. So anybody out there, Ruth Roman. Let's just dive in and talk about where was she born?
She was born Norma Roman on December 22nd, 1922 in Lynn, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. And I love this. Her father was a carnival barker.
I love it too. Of course he was.
Of course he was. And he worked the carnival circuit. And her mother was a dancer, so she kind of had the showbiz genes.
Yes, she did.
She was named Norma, which was an anagram of the family last name Roman, which was, I thought, kind of fun, until a fortune teller told her very superstitious mother that Norma was a very unlucky name, so they quickly renamed her Ruth.
Okay.
Well, Ruth's father died unexpectedly when she was 8, and her mother was forced to move her and her 2 sisters to Boston's West End tenement district.
Okay.
There, Mrs. Roman had to take menial jobs to support the family. They were often moving kind of one step ahead of the rent collector. It was just sort of a very impoverished childhood. But one thing Ruth Roman says about her childhood, she said, it wasn't dreary at all. Mm-hmm. When you start out poor and you don't know what you're missing, I've never met a family, rich or poor, who had a happier life than we did together.
And this is rare for the stories that we tell on this podcast because so many people have had horrible childhoods.
Yes.
And the fact that they were poor and she was a happy kid, they were a happy family.
I know. I love hearing that.
That just says a lot about her, too.
Yeah.
So she gets bitten by the acting bug while she's in school plays in grade school, and she just knew that she was meant to be an actress. She even dropped out of high school to pursue the career full-time. She works as a movie usherette during the day while working at the New England Repertory Company at night. And for 3 years, I'm sure this is how she got her training. She's appearing in small roles and working as a stagehand in summer stock throughout New England. That sounds like my childhood.
I know. I like her background. I like that she got involved in
I do
theater
too.
and she did lots of things to kind of train herself.
Right.
When Ruth was 16, not only did she drop out of high school to pursue a career full time, she also got married.
Yikes.
What's up with these 16-year-olds getting married?
don't know.
Her first husband was a guy named Jack Flaxman who worked in an art store in Boston. Their marriage was doomed from the start. I mean, I think within 6 months it was over. So that came and went. Well, after the divorce, she ventured on to New York with two of her girlfriends to try her luck at Broadway. You know, she struggled there for a few years. Nothing really quite came of it. She survived by being a waitress and a babysitter and a sales girl. And she also posed for those crime magazine covers.
Yes.
Which, as Ruth Roman once explained, she said, I was the girl with the knife or the semi-automatic in my hand.
So she did finally catch a break in 1942 when she won a small role as a wave in the musical film Stage Door Canteen, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast. It was filmed in New York, and it had everybody and the kitchen sink in it. I mean, anybody who was a big star in the day.
Cast.
Were there. So she's filming for 4 days. She makes some money for 4 days filming. She pays off her creditors, and she buys a one-way ticket to Hollywood.
Ruth knew what she was doing.
She did. I love that when she lands in Hollywood, she moves into a boarding house, which kind of reminds me of our episode about the Hollywood
Studio Club.
Studio Club, yes. So she's in a boarding house with 6 other aspiring actresses, one of whom was Linda Christian, and they jokingly called their house the House of 7 Garbos.
Very clever.
Which I just love that. So she learns the ropes, she's making the rounds at studios, and this leads her to some walk-on.
Yeah, she gets a few walk-ons on some pretty prestigious movies like Ladies Courageous and Since You Went Away and Song of Nevada, which was a Roy Rogers and Trigger movie, but still, she's getting experience under her belt.
And working with some big people.
Yeah, some nice people. But she really gets a lucky break when she wins the leading role in this low-budget Western film called White Stallion. But unfortunately, it was never released. But her disappointment was kind of short-lived because soon Universal cast her in the title role of this 15-week serial called Jungle Queen in 1945. And she was the Jungle Queen.
Okay.
But despite being the title character, it wasn't a very big part. And she just had to walk around and be dramatic and mysterious and sometimes walk through fire.
Okay.
But that series has since become a cult following, and it was in Jungle Queen that David O. Selznick saw her and thought she had potential and placed her under personal contract. But he didn't do anything with her. She just languished there.
Okay.
And she finally begged him, just please let me out of my contract so I can actually go and do some work. And he did eventually.
So she gets some small, kind of not great roles in films like You Came Along.
Which was Liz Scott's film debut.
Which is very cool. Incendiary Blonde, I love that title. 1945 with Betty Hutton and Gilda with
she has this
Rita
tiny little part in
Hayworth,
Gilda.
Glenn Ford. I found this fascinating. In 1946, she is
this.
cast as a harem girl in the Marx Brothers comedy A Night in Casablanca, which is 1946. Her part was left on the editing room floor, but she is featured on the poster prominently as this scantily clad harem girl, and she's not even in the film.
Isn't that hilarious?
It is. And I think you stated in your blog that in Manhattan there was a 50-foot cutout of her above the movie theater to promote the film.
And she's not even in it.
She's not even in it, yeah.
Meanwhile, one interesting thing I think Ruth Roman did, she started writing down her exploits as a young actress in Hollywood.
I love this.
Herbert Yates, who ran Republic Pictures, he offered her $100 for the rights to one of her stories. It was called The Whip Song, and it was about this masked female Robin Hood type character, and it became the basis for Republic Pictures movie serial Zorro's Black Whip. But Ruth Roman received no writing credit for it.
And then another of her stories, which I love that she named it after the boarding house, The House of Seven Garbos, about her time living with her fellow actresses, was also sold, but apparently nothing ever came of it.
Yeah. And about this time, she's supplementing her income a little bit by selling these stories, but she's getting a lot closer to a big break. Universal, they tested her for the role of Kitty Collins in The Killers, which of course went to Ava Gardner. She tested for the female lead in Crossfire, which of course went to Gloria Graham. She tested for Outpost in Morocco, which went to Marie Windsor. So she's getting closer.
She's getting closer.
And closer.
But God bless her, she keeps going. When you don't get stuff, it's hard.
Yes. Well, she finally got, I think, a really big break when she lands a nice featured role in this 1948 RKO film called Good Sam, which starred Gary Cooper and Ann Sheridan.
Okay.
That got her noticed. And that same year, she's cast as the title character of this 20th Century Fox Western called Belle Starr's Daughter from 1948. That starred Robert Montgomery and Rod Cameron. So she's starting to get not only roles, but leading roles.
And a big one to come, she plays the vicious killer in RKO's noir classic, The Window.
Yes, which I just
1949.
rewatched the other
Did
day.
you?
And that movie so holds up, and she is so good.
Yeah. And that was her first leading role with her name above the title, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, real benchmark for her in Hollywood. But I think at that point, the studios are recognizing her potential as a rising star.
Yes.
So Warner Brothers scoops her up and places her under contract in 1949, and they give her a really nice supporting role as Kirk Douglas's wife in Champion. In an article that Ruth Roman contributed to the Saturday Evening Post in 1950, she wrote about working with Kirk Douglas that they had made a bet that Champion would make her a star. And she didn't believe it, and she said, no way, I'm not going to bet with you. She later stated, if I had taken the bet, I would have lost, for the part of Emma in this movie did more for my career than any other role.
Yeah,
so Kirk was right.
He was right. She was nominated for a Golden Globe Award as New Star of the Year for her role. And she followed that up with another strong supporting role, playing a foil to Bette Davis in Beyond the Forest. I mean, if you can stand toe-to-toe with her, boy.
And she does, because she plays the daughter of Moose, who's the man that Bette Davis kills out on the hunting trip. And so Ruth knows what's going on with Betty. And
it's directed by King Vidor, so he's no slouch.
How do you go wrong with that?
Yeah. She gets to sing and dance with Milton Berle and Virginia Mayo and Always Leave Them Laughing in 1949.
And then in 1950, the studio cast her as the female lead in a couple of Westerns. One was Barricade with Dane Clark, and the other was Colt 45 with Randolph Scott. So she's getting nice leading men, she's getting leading roles, but I think her star status was really elevated when she was cast as one of the female leads of this very moving drama called Three Secrets from 1950. It also starred A-list stars Eleanor Parker and Patricia Neal.
I have never seen this, and I love the description of it. I can't wait to watch it.
Well, and knowing how much you love Eleanor Parker and Patricia Neal, you have to see this movie. It's really wonderful.
So this is followed up by a Technicolor Western. Now we're moving into color with Gary Cooper. She plays his love interest in 1950.
Dallas.
And in 1950, she's on the cover of Life magazine, The Progress of a Rising Star.
All right. Well, you've made it when you're on the cover of Life magazine.
Right. And they're saying, you're a rising star.
You're it.
She's also named one of the top 10 stars of tomorrow in a Motion Picture Herald Film Magazine poll. And with the rise of her star, also her love life is happening as well.
Yeah,
right?
her love life perks up.
So she's on a cross-country publicity tour. She meets a television and radio executive, Mortimer Hall, son of New York Post owner Dorothy Schiff. They were married in Vegas, December 17th, 1950. And a few hours after the wedding, she's back at work, he's back in New York, and eventually he moves out to Southern California to be together, and they welcome a son 2 years later, Richard.
That's nice. And Richard, of course, being the same son that was on the sinking of the Andrea Doria.
Right.
Well, in 1951, Roman appeared with Richard Todd, Zachary Scott, we love Zachary Scott, and a very memorable Mercedes McCambridge in a very underrated film noir called Lightning Strikes Twice, which is about a New York actress who falls in love with a ranch owner who's recently been acquitted of murdering his wife.
Okay.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Well, that same year, this is another pivotal film and the one that most people probably know her from. She is cast in Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. Studio head Jack Warner forces Hitchcock to cast her. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, you don't want to force Alfred Hitchcock to cast somebody because he's going to be a mean director to you if he doesn't want you in his film.
Yes. And of course, Hitchcock was sort of known for picking a scapegoat on every film. There's just one person that he would just pick on and bully. And on Strangers on a Train, it became Ruth Roman. I think because she was forced on him, she wasn't who he wanted for the role.
And she wasn't blonde.
And she wasn't the cool blonde. She was a cool brunette. He didn't think she had sex appeal, which I totally disagree with.
Yeah, totally disagree. And she's wonderful in the film.
Oh, she's so good. Well, I think because he picked on her so much that she became more determined than ever that she was going to give a killer performance. And she does. She's so memorable in that movie, and she gives such a great performance. So Ruth Roman rounded out 1951 in a really wonderful movie that I love. It's called Tomorrow is Another Day. It's an extremely underrated film noir. It's directed by Felix E. Feist, and it's actually one of my, if not my very favorite Ruth Roman movie.
Well, and it co-stars one of this podcast's favorite bad boys, Steve Cochran.
I know, Ruth and Steve together.
That would be, that's like combustible.
Well, it is combustible. Their chemistry is so great.
I bet it is.
You know, they play this duo. They're on the run. They're trying to turn their lives around. He's an ex-con. She's kind of a floozy. They want to turn their lives around and go straight, but she kills her policeman boyfriend in self-defense, but she makes the ex-convict believe that he pulled the trigger. So now they're on the run, but they really, really want to do right. So as they continue on the run, she starts the film off as this very hard, platinum blonde floozy, and she's slowly transformed into this more demure, quiet brunette. She even changes her hair color, and it also changes her character. We see how she softens and how she really, really wants to do the right thing.
I love that transition.
It's an interesting character study of what these two go through as they try to live life on the right side of the law, but they still have to be held responsible for what happened, which is the thrust of the movie.
So we're going to get into when she ends being a contract player, when she is a free agent. But before we do that and talk about her experience on the Andrea Doria, what is this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz, Steve?
Well, the pop quiz question today, it also involves, of course, Ruth Roman, and why not involve the Andrea Doria, the sinking of? Besides Ruth Roman, there was another famous actress who was also on board the ship when it struck the Stockholm and sank. Who was the actress?
Okay, I think I know the answer to this. We will be right back with more about the wonderful Ruth Roman after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. In 1941, Moose was a 120-pound German Shepherd being used as a guard dog by Universal Studios. The studio was filming their newest monster movie, The Wolfman, starring actor Lon Chaney Jr. He played the unlucky Lawrence Talbot, who falls victim to a werewolf and inherits its curse. Well, one scene called for a dog to attack Chaney, with the two engaging in a fight. The studio had rounded up a few dogs, but when they tried to shoot the scene, none of the dogs were right for the part. Legend says it was Chaney himself who said, "Let's see if that guard dog Moose can do it." So someone went to fetch Moose, they rolled the cameras, and Moose promptly bit straight through Chaney's protective glove. He even broke a few bones in Chaney's hand. But they got the footage, and surprisingly, Chaney became so smitten with Moose that he bought him from the Watchmen owner shortly after filming Wrapped. Well, Chaney and Moose became best friends. Moose became a common sight at Chaney's side and even hung out on the set while Chaney filmed scenes for his movies. Eventually, Moose became something of a star in his own right, appearing in several Universal films over a 3-year period. Moose was paid a cool $25 a day for his work. That's about $450 a day now. Who's a good boy? And now back to Steve and Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the wonderful actress Ruth Roman. And when we left off, Ruth is now becoming a free agent. She was under contract with Warner Brothers. They loaned her out to MGM. She did a couple of pictures. As a free agent, she has some success with, number one, with James Stewart playing his wife in the Far Country, 1954.
Great movie, by the way.
And she also goes on to do a United Artists picture, Down Three Dark Streets.
And, we've talked about that movie movie on the podcast before because the climax of the film happens underneath the Hollywood sign where Ruth has to battle it out with Casey Adams, who plays her boyfriend, who's blackmailing her. It's such a great ending of a movie, and any old Hollywood aficionado needs to see that film.
Yeah, so that's
just for that ending scene.
Yeah, that was 1954. I love, and neither of us have seen this film. It's called Joe Macbeth. You describe it as perhaps one of her most challenging roles. 1955, conjuring up Lady Macbeth in a reimagined version of the Shakespeare classic. So it's set against this background of a gritty crime boss played by Paul Douglas. And here's a clip.
Look at yourself. You're going to be head man and you're shaking like a kid who broke his first window.
Lay off me, will you? I told you I'm not going to do it.
You'll never get another chance like this again. Never.
I'm thinking of you. Suppose we get caught.
Were you ever caught? Never. Because you jumped in and did what you had to do. What's stopping you now? You know what you want. You know how to get it. What's holding you back, Joe? He'll be asleep in Tommy's room.
Everybody will know I did it.
But what do you take me for? Don't you think I thought of that?
I've always wanted to play Lady Macbeth. I want to see what she does with that. I can't wait to see that film.
Interesting concept. I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah. She does dabble in some television here, too. This is sort of the beginnings of the...
She was smart to dip her toes in early.
Yes, for television theater, Lux Video Theater. And in 1956, there's a couple of pivotal things that happen. First of all, her 6-year marriage to Mortimer Hall ends. That summer, she decides who wouldn't want to, right? After you've gone through this horrible divorce. You're going to take your lovely son, Richard, and you're going to go to Europe for a vacation, right?
Which was great until they boarded the Italian ocean liner, the SS Andrea Doria.
Right. So,
they actually were coming home. They boarded at Cannes as first-class passengers, and they're trying to sail back to the United States. But unfortunately, on the night of July the 25th, the vessel collided with the Swedish passenger liner, the MS Stockholm.
Right. So at the time of the collision, Ruth is down in the lounge having a nightcap. She ditches her high-heeled shoes. She runs back to her cabin barefoot to get her sleeping son, which is such a heartbreaking image. Several hours later, they're both evacuated with the other passengers, but they get separated.
They're separated.
Which
Can
is
you
just
imagine
horrific.
What a mother must go through.
Oh my gosh. So Richard, who I'm assuming is around 5, 6?
He's 3, I think.
Oh, he's 3.
Yeah.
Okay. He's lowered first into a waiting lifeboat. Before she could follow, that lifeboat departs. So she's getting into another lifeboat and is eventually rescued with 750 other survivors. In fact, 1,660 people survived, 46 people died. And so it wasn't the Titanic relived in that they were able to utilize most of the lifeboats, and the crew handled it in a really calm and organized manner, the whole saving of the people.
Yeah, Ruth Roman was definitely a survivor.
Yes, she was. I mean, she's been through it all. A few months after that ordeal, she attends, this is just, I think, funny. A few months after that ordeal, she attends a bullfight.
Well, there's that.
And then Anthony Quinn happens to be there, and he introduces her to Bud Burton Moss, who was working at his father's restaurant at the time, but he later becomes an agent, a Hollywood agent.
Big agent.
To Rita Hayworth and Sid Charisse and June Allison and Shelley Winters. They end up getting married after just 3 months. They run off to Panama and get married.
Uh-oh, red flag.
Yeah, and again, it's short-lived and ends after 4 years.
Yeah. Also, as her marriage ended, she's sort of floundering in her career, too. She no longer is under the protection of a studio. She's a free agent. She's just taking what she can get. And definitely the quality of her films suffered, and the momentum she had with her Warner Brothers years was waning. She played a saloon girl who's a rival to Virginia Mayo for the love of Robert Stack in Great Day in the Morning, which was from 1956. That did not set anything on fire.
Right.
And she was utterly wasted as John Payne's wife in Rebel in Town, 1956. And she's also in a lackluster character espionage drama with Sterling Hayden called 5 Steps to Danger, also in 1956. And she ended the 50s with movies like Nicholas Ray's box office bomb, Bitter Victory in 57, and also in Desert Desperados, 1959, which was a film so bad that Ruth Roman told the Miami Herald reporter in 1971 that it was made in Italy and it should have stayed there.
I love her sass. I just love her. So her A-list days as a leading lady are beginning to wane, but she returns to the theater. She appears in Two for the Seesaw in Chicago, and she plays this kooky, I love that play, uninhibited woman who complicated a mild-mannered lawyer's attempts to lead a normal existence in New York City. She wins an award. She gets the Sarah Sins Award.
A big one.
Yeah, in 1959. And that brings her back to Hollywood, and this time she dives into television.
Yeah, and one of the first things she does a TV movie version of the Philadelphia Story in 1959, which is kind of funny because she's also often confused with Ruth Hussey, who played the role in the movie.
Yes.
She plays the role on TV.
She plays the photojournalist.
The great photographer.
I can just see her playing that, too.
Yeah.
She'd be great in that role.
Yeah, unfortunately, the series only lasted a year, so it was very short-lived. But she ended up appearing in episodes of Bonanza and Naked City, The Untouchables, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour. So apparently Alfred didn't hate her so much that he hired her again for his TV show.
Now, in the mid-60s, she makes a shift in what kinds of roles to go for. She kind of gives up the idea of playing the glamour gal and leans into that character actress, earthier side of herself.
Blousy, kind of sexy.
Which is just so
rough.
perfect, yeah.
And I think this is when her career gets really interesting.
She appears in The Long Hot Summer, the series in 1965, based on the film. William Faulkner wrote the original novel. She portrays Minnie Littlejohn, who's the mistress of the family patriarch. Ooh, she's playing mistresses. That only lasted one season, unfortunately. But she was also in...
I love this movie. This was one of her first cougar roles. It's called Love Has Many Faces.
Yes, 1965.
Which was a Lana Turner vehicle, but she and Virginia Gray steal every scene they're in as these older cougars on the beach who are trying to make it with these young, hot beach boys.
Okay, I love it.
Played by Hugh O'Brien is one of them, yeah.
I love it. She finishes out the decade on all kinds of television shows. The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, Mission Impossible, Marcus Welby. The 70s, more of that. Mannix, Gunsmoke, Ironside, Mod Squad, Policewoman, and one that I remember, as you said, talk about being scared straight.
Yes.
Not that I was doing drugs in the 1970s, but she plays the sympathetic psychiatrist who helps the young girl, played by Jamie Smith Jackson, struggling with drug addiction in Go Ask Alice.
Ooh, Go Ask Alice.
Wasn't that a scary film?
Didn't everybody read that book? And wasn't everyone terrified that you were going to go to a party and someone was going to slip you one little pill and you were just going to go crazy?
Yeah, you were going to go crazy and be forever
and jump out a window.
Yeah. And then she does a few other films, but talk about The Baby in 1973. This sounds like I've never seen it.
It is the strangest, bizarre, kind of wonderful movie, and it's so warped. And this is a movie that's gained cult status over the years. She plays this wonderfully over-the-top mother named Mrs. Wadsworth, and she's being investigated by a social worker played by Anjanette Comer. Well, it seems that Mrs. Wadsworth and her two beautiful daughters, played by Suzanne Zenner and Mariana Hill, well, they keep her son, who's a seemingly mentally challenged adult man in his 20s, whom they call Baby. They keep him locked up in a playpen and they force him to wear diapers and basically force this 20-year-old man to act as a baby.
This is so creepy.
So it's
and
a giant
weird.
baby.
Yeah. How bizarre.
It's so bizarre. You watch it and you're like, what the hell is happening
here? Yes.
But it's very compelling though, and she's very good. She just plays psycho quite well.
There's also a few other films. The Killing Kind, 1973. She plays the lawyer of John Savage.
Yeah.
Psycho ex-con, which is a thriller starring Ann Sothern and Cindy Williams.
She plays the man's girlfriend, yeah.
And then she goes on to, in 1974, she's in a thing called Impulse.
Yeah, where she plays the victim of a gigolo played by William Shatner. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up. That's a real movie.
Well, 1974, right?
Yes. Well, then she plays in another movie called A Knife for the Ladies. She portrays this Arizona heiress who uses arsenic to treat syphilis.
Okay.
Don't ask.
Yeah. Day of the Animals, 1977. She's playing a wealthy woman. So even within this character part of her career, she's very diverse.
Yes.
Folks, lawyers and aristocrats. That's with Leslie Nielsen, Christopher George, Linda Day George.
we love
my
her.
goodness. She goes on a high-end hiking expedition in Northern California to discover the animals on their deserted hike have gone berserk and are deadly. This sounds like a cult classic, too. I haven't seen this. Have you seen it?
No, this one, yes. I
Yeah.
have seen this one,
Yeah.
yes. It's exactly what you think it is.
Okay. Yes, exactly as you would picture.
Yes.
All right. So there's some question. Does she get married again?
You know what? Yes, we think so. It's never been truly confirmed, but some sources say that she did marry again. Some ignore him totally, but in the 70s, she met a guy named William Ross Wilson, and they may or may not have married in 1976. Who's to say? And not much is known about that union. So
Okay.
we'll put a little tab in him for now.
And just as we wind down in the 1980s, she pops up on all our favorite Fantasy Island episodes.
And who wasn't on Fantasy
Who
Island?
wasn't? If you watch those reruns now, you will just enjoy.
Everybody.
Same with that and Love
Well, you know my
Boat.
Love Boat
Yes,
fetish.
you're
I have a total Love Boat fetish.
You're a Love Boat fan. And same with Murder, She Wrote.
Oh,
right?
Those are the big three for
I mean-
any washed up classic movie star.
Yes.
They're going to show up on one of those
Either
shows.
going to be the murderer or her old best friend from, wherever.
Right.
So she was obviously enjoying some success on those. And then she gets a last hurrah as a recurring character on Knots Landing. She plays Sylvia Lean, a manipulative, vengeful ex-secretary, and the ex-lover to Howard Duff's character.
Which was kind of fun to see them together because they had co-starred together in 1954 in this horrible film called Tanganyika. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, just horrible.
Yeah, wow. Well, I may or may not have had a teeny tiny part on Knots Landing at one point. I wonder if it was any
did
of
you
the episodes.
play?
Oh, I don't even remember the character's name. It was pretty small.
Was Ruth Roman there at
I
the
don't
time?
think so. I don't think so. I should look it up.
That's
I should look
fine.
it up.
But you might have walked the
might have been
hollow
my first
grounds
role.
of Ruth Roman's
I know.
heels.
Exactly. So Ruth Roman ends up moving to Laguna Beach
Yeah,
toward the end
she
of her
lived
career.
very peacefully in her later years in Laguna Beach, and she lived to be of the ripe old age of 76. And on September the 9th, 1999, she passed away peacefully in her sleep down in Laguna.
And is her son Richard still with us? Do you know?
I think he is. I think
Okay.
Richard is still around. He's listed in all of her obituaries. But as we mentioned earlier, that fourth husband, William Ross Wilson, he wasn't mentioned in any of the obituaries. So either they got divorced before she passed away, or maybe they weren't ever married. We don't really know.
All right. One quick question. If you had only 2 Ruth Roman movies to watch, what would they be?
That is, can I have 3?
Okay, you can have 3.
Okay. It's the 2 I mentioned at the top of the show. The Window.
Yes.
And
Strangers.
on a Train,
Yeah.
but also Tomorrow is Another Day.
Okay.
The one with Steve Cochran. My favorite Ruth Roman movie. It's such a must to see.
Well, we love her, and I love that we get to highlight her career. I think it's time for the answer to our Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the question was, besides Ruth Roman, what other famous Hollywood actress was on the Andrea Doria when it sank?
I think it's someone who was married to a very famous actor as well.
I think you would be right. And of course, that would be Betsy Drake, who at the time was married to Cary Grant. And she had been visiting Cary Grant as he made a movie in Europe. And she was also on her way back to the States when the collision happened.
What are the odds? Wow.
2 movie stars on one sinking boat.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, if you could follow us on social media, our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood We're on Instagram, Facebook, and you can watch the pod on YouTube.
And we would love to hear from you. So if you have any comments or questions or anything, please email us info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor, Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.